Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode on the podcast. On this episode, I bring back on a guest that's been on recently. Her name is Simi Gosling. She is a holistic relationship counsellor. We got so much great feedback from our last conversation, which was all about dating and the dating world in this modern age. And we got a lot of views on a lot of the reels that we made as well. But a lot of people started asking questions about what about the people that are in relationships and how to navigate those types of things. So I invited Simi back on to share in a conversation about that because she does this for work. She helps people navigate the challenges in relationships. So some of the things we dive deep into are how to create conscious and healthy relationships, compromise versus sacrifice, conscious versus unconscious, your attachment styles and how they play out when you meet someone and you start to date someone, why you should stop listening to the generic relationship advice that is on social media. Just because it went viral does not mean that it is good advice. How to create healthy boundaries and what to do when someone in the relationship is growing and the other one's not, or when the one person it wants to improve and work on the relationship and the other one's just not on the same level. How to navigate that. And I think these are all such great points, and there's so many examples that we share, and we share from our experience of relationships in the past, and it's just a really fun conversation. So if you're in a relationship or if you want to be in a relationship, this is all awareness, right? It's us learning and becoming more aware so that when we do go into these situations, we are better equipped. And I know for me, it's just given me so much insight into my own relationships and how I can show up in a better way for me, but also for the other people. This is a really powerful conversation. I hope you enjoy this. Before you start listening, if you could, wherever you're listening right now, just drop a subscribe and a like and go follow on Instagram, The Conscious Podcast. That would mean the world to me. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you for all your support and enjoy this episode. Simi, welcome back to the podcast.
Yay. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. There's not many people I ask back on for no other distinct reason, but
there's a reason. I'm your favourite.
Yeah. Sorry if I've offended everyone else that's been on once and hasn't been on again. But hey, we had such a great time last time.
Thank you.
We were like, let's dive into some more stuff.
Yeah, and I feel like last time we navigated a lot towards dating, but I think it's also a great opportunity to share with some of the listeners about relationships.
Being in relationships and navigating that fun world.
Yeah, that turmoil.
Yeah. So we've asked some questions from people on Instagram. So, if you're not already following, you should be, because we put some stuff out for people to drop in their questions. But I guess one thing that on my mind that I would want to know, and I want to know, is where do we learn our relationship styles? Is it what we model from our parents, or is there a different way that we're learning how to operate in relationships?
I think that's a challenging question because it kind of depends on what you mean. So we learn our attachment styles, of course, from our primary caregivers. We can pick up our conflict styles based on our previous past relationships. It all comes from different angles. And a huge part as well that in a positive sense, we learn a lot from our own behavior and a lot from our own inner journey as well. So depending what angle you're particularly wanting to reflect on, it's kind of a compact of your whole life journey.
So it's not necessarily just what you've seen as your parents.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So generally, particularly in your attachment styles and the way that you respond to a lot of stress and conflict will come from either parents or past relationships, and particularly negative experiences, because they tend to stick and rewire our little nervous systems a little bit more. But yeah, it can really be a lifelong journey.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I reflect on and look back on is maybe that we're talking about this on our walk, the first relationship we had, and maybe there was all the right and wrong things happened in there, how much that impacts us moving forward. And then we almost have that little bit of fear in our relationships because we're like, what if that happens again? What do you tell people that are having that fear of holding back because they're like, that might happen?
There's quite a few things that you can actually do to like work through that. But if you particularly notice that those patterns are repeating, and particularly in a self-sabotaging kind of way, really sitting down and doing your shadow work and doing your somatic practices. For those that don't know or understand, when you go into your breath work and you go into your spinal energetics, you're giving your body an opportunity to process all the unprocessed emotions and really kind of not release them, but actually integrate them and get rid of that visceral hold that they tend to have on you. Because I know for myself, before I started doing the work, I had some from when I was 16, 17, and I first started dating, that I was like 27. I was like, don't you do that to me. 10 years later, you know? But it does. It sticks around because our body doesn't know the time concept of that it's now, unless we physically show it, it's safe, that it's safe to let that go.
So what do you see people struggle with most in relationships?
In relationships, it's very, very tricky. I think there's such like a nuance between learning to go through our life journeys as an individual, and we learn all these tools like self-regulation, how not every thought is a real thought. And we learn all these skills, and then we kind of go into this relationship and expect it to be easy. And like, oh, if we just fight, I just self-regulate. And that's not actually the case. Self-regulation is, yes, a part of it. But if you look at like so many of the studies, it takes so much more than that to have a healthy, happy relationship. You've got to then learn these skills of compromising. How do we manage like conflict that's constantly repeating itself? How do we manage these new scenarios and life challenges? How do I manage and allow them to be where they are right now and honor where I am at the same time? So it becomes this dance. And I think that that's difficult for a lot of people because we've very much as a society become this self-functioning machine, if you will. And we've learned how to be independent really, really well. But now how do we go back in with a new level of awareness and actually integrate some of these tools that we can do it together?
Yeah. So your background is holistic relationship counselling.
Yes.
Yeah. So where do you start with people that come to you like with their struggles? Mm-hmm. How do you... Everyone's going to have different problems and struggles and needs in that. Is there a process that you kind of start with everyone that's like, this is what you need to not get to, but I guess start with in order to start improving?
So the way that I work is very much client-centered. So I try not to do like what a traditional psychologist does and go, let's go back to the start and, figure this all out. I start small. So let's start with what's presenting today. And for that person, it might be, well, a lot of the time, if I'm honest, they come in and they say, my partner won't do X, Y, Z. So it's usually projection, which is fine. It's good. And it's a signal so we can start to figure out what's actually going on. Then we can break that down and figure out, why does that bother us? Is it an us thing? Is it a them thing? Or is it a we thing? And we can start to figure out and kind of just pull back some gentle layers and start to work on things. One thing that I'm very big on is not just going, right, let's just lift the lid, which can be very common in a lot of clinical psychology. And then the person leaves a session almost just shattered and traumatized. So let's get some skills going and give some confidence and then keep moving from there.
Yeah. So how do you then let's say someone comes in and it's like, struggling in the relationship and they're saying they do this, that's affecting me. How do you then start to break down that, and where do you then navigate from there when it's a lot of, you said projection before?
Mm-hmm. So that's where a lot of like the questions come back to self-reflect onto them. So it's nothing that I try to necessarily diagnose, but usually if I ask like, what about this situation necessarily bothers you? Oh, I feel abandoned. Is that a common theme? Have you felt that way before? And then usually we can kind of start to get some answers and figure it out from there.
Because you said compromise and sacrifice. Like what's the difference between compromising and sacrifice to make a relationship work?
So when we compromise, we're obviously coming up with an agreement. I think a lot of people, when we come up relationships, maybe from a lack of awareness, we can think of right and wrong, and my experience is right and you're wrong. And rather than hearing that both people have an experience and both are true, and then finding a compromise from there. Then there's what I call sacrifice. But there are times when you have to go, you know what, because I love you, I'm going to fucking do this right now. You know what I mean? But again, it's such a nuance because it's like you want to do that in a way that's loving for them, but also loving for you. Because if we're constantly the ones sacrificing, we lose that dance. We sacrifice ourselves.
And I feel like especially like from my experience and what I've heard and had conversations about is we all come into a relationship with our own set of expectations of like, this is what I expect the relationship to be like. And I expect this person to know my needs, give my needs. I guess there's that side of, yes, your needs need to be communicated and met. Otherwise, you're going to feel like, well, my needs aren't getting met. Why am I in this relationship? It's not a relationship or a very loving one. But where do you see people, I guess, struggling with that in terms of like coming into a relationship or being in a relationship and being like, you're not meeting my needs versus how can we meet each other's needs together?
So that's one of the most difficult things, I think, when it comes to relationships. People don't realize the constant dance between interdependence and independence. I can come in and be really codependent and say, you need to fix all my needs. But then if I go too far the other way, then I'm completely independent. But we need a little bit of both so that we have our co-regulation and that healthy balance. Yeah. So it really comes down to just, being able to communicate that, and also just, it is a journey, like learn, okay, how much is too much? And every dynamic is going to be so different because you've also then got people's wounds and they're trying to come through this and that. And yeah, I wish it was black and white and a simple answer, but it's really something that you learn through doing, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And I guess what do you see the normal things that you see people struggling with that come to you? Like what's some common threads that you see, even in just your friendship groups and stuff like that, not to mention names, but like what's some of the things that you see people are struggling with that you want to provide solutions for?
I think when it comes to like the most common things is, I think for a lot of us, we've kind of gone, or as a collective, we've gone through this massive healing journey, and we can figure out, this happened to me and it gave me anxious attachment, it gave me avoidant, and then we kind of go into this relationship and we're trying to apply that. But also on top of that, there's so many different micro behaviors that we're kind of just forgetting about, that we don't realize how much are impacting our relationships. So is our ability to let them be in a happy headspace there? Are we able to allow that person to be who they are without controlling the narrative or trying to, really try and be sneaky in our behavior? And I think that's where you have to learn to be very, not self-critical, but self-reflective of what's going on internally within you, and also be honest with yourself, because everyone falls in a little bit of a habit of playing a game, whether we like to admit it or not. There's times when we're like, oh, what happens if I poke the bear there? You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, like, why did I do that? Like, what was that serving within me? And keep going with those little micro behaviors, because they tend to have a big impact. When I see a lot of relationships start to break down, it's often because of constantly putting yourselves into a sympathetic dominant state without any proper resolution. So that's why you have like your divorced couples. They come into a room by the end of it and they can't even look at each other, and they've trained their nervous systems so much that that person's a threat. And all these little micro behaviors and micro games, and it's very dysregulating under the surface.
Yeah. So then how, because I'm guessing this comes back to like what people have learnt throughout their life. I guess in a relation, like from my side of things, is like in that relationship, if people have learnt so many things, where does a couple start? If a couple are listening right now and they're like, where we butt heads so much, we're not getting to this point of, resolution with things, but we just stay in it and continue it because that's, what's expected. How do you then...
There's two key points to this. One, if you're at a point where you are just absolutely gridlocked and you are seeing each other as just threats and it's not comfortable, you can't regulate together, you need to have what I call a circuit breaker. And that's literally both consciously being like, let's leave this right now where it is and let's go watch a comedy show. Let's go away for a weekend. Let's go and do an activity together that's not trying to solve and figure and sort everything out, and allow yourselves just to come back down to earth a little bit. And then once you're in that place where that kind of high emotional state is switched off and you're able to cognitively process a lot better, then have a good communicative conversation. On top of that, though, there are always going to be things that never fully resolve. And what do we do? Like, you know, how do we figure that out? But it's natural. There's no point in this world where every single person is going to agree on every single thing every single time. It's not reality. So then we want to switch to how do we manage the conflict then? Because we can disagree in a loving, caring way and learn to manage the impact that this has. And that's a very different situation than constantly agreeing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I guess if you're constantly agreeing, then there's that bit of you that's like, maybe you're always that sacrificer. You're always like never sharing your needs or wants or how you're feeling in those certain situations. So yeah, it's interesting because it's like bringing up stuff from my past of like, yeah, I remember doing that.
Yes, yes.
Can you relate to me?
Where do you think I learn all this, guys?
Lived experience, yeah.
Half lived, and then it's funny, when I did my holistic relationship course, I didn't lose a single point. And I actually got Student of the Month, and I knew it because of my own shit.
But how do you know so much about this stuff, Simi?
Well, I fucked myself over, and then I had to learn this. So I speak from experience. But yes, I did study as well. It's really interesting.
I guess it's like, for me growing up, I've only had a few relationships. I'd say there's only been 3 sort of main serious sort of ones, and then dated in between. Where I think I've had these conversations with people around me, and just observing is, now with social media, now with lots of people talking about relationships, and there's a lot of black and white information, and people, will get on the reels and say, if he does this, leave him, or if she does this, leave her, or this is how a masculine man should be, or how a feminine woman should be in a relationship. I think people feel very under pressure in a relationship to be all these things. Like, how do you feel in this, like, seeing all these things coming out and so much information that's just kind of bombarded on people?
It frustrates me. And this is a conversation that we've had before, and a huge aspect as well of why I took a step back from JAR. In a way, there's so much projection within the space of, well, this is how I got to that point and this is how I got to that journey, so this means it must be right. So then applying that to everyone is actually more damage than good. I remember there was like this one thing that went quite viral, and everyone was talking about, you need to do a weekly check-in with your partner, and you got to sit down and you got to ask about your relationship and ask how it went. And I had so many clients be like, this is making me and my partner fight so much, because it's just almost like creating issues where there weren't issues. It's like, oh, well, actually, let me think. No, when you did this, like things that normally you would brush over, now you're looking back and revisiting them all, but they didn't need to be revisited. Like, there were little micro things in the moment, but now you're making an intentional time. So it's different, because for some people that might be a huge success. For other people, it's not. You can't apply the same thing to every relationship. What a masculine man should be in a relationship is going to look very different in a heterosexual relationship versus like a homosexual relationship, or someone who's from an Italian background versus, Australian background. And that's okay. It's all about finding your own healthy boundaries and values in your relationship, and figuring out who you are, and then figuring out what would complement that, what you would like. You can't live and I know it's rich of me to say, because I could then go onto social media and part of what I post and do is the same thing, but you can't live your relationship values externally. You can take some of the advice and listen to it, but if it doesn't align with you, you've got to know enough of yourself to go, actually, I appreciate what you're saying, but that reel's not for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've watched stuff where I've you can go from the Andrew Tate side of things, and very kind of vulgar and like direct of like it should be this way, the man should do this, and this is what providing looks like, and XYZ. But I'm also like that doesn't resonate with me. And being a father, having a small child, and even just like the lifestyles, right? I went and had coffee with my friend this morning, and they have a very different lifestyle. Like, both working, little child. Do I agree or disagree? This is going to parenting, but like agree or disagree on their lifestyle. I used to be like, oh, I think, this should be the way, but it also, I know that came from my parents and the communities and social groups that I grew up in. They have their views, and they say, like, there's times where they share with me, oh, you should be doing this, or like, in the relationship, you should focus on this. And it's like, cool, thanks for your opinion. Like, I respect that. But also, does that resonate with me? And knowing that everything is so unique. Like, my journey is unique, let alone the relationships I have are going to be so unique. I've found myself on social media sometimes being like, because I respect the person, what they say, I'm going to listen. And they've said, oh, it's this or this. And then I've found myself going in the situation, oh no, they did exactly what that person said on social media, so that means I cut them off, or I do this. And it's like, I don't think it has to be that harsh.
No, it's not black and white. It's really not. And I think that it can be a really terrible pitfall to fall down. And I've even caught myself falling in it sometimes and being like, well, did he pull out my chair? Not going on another date with him. You know what I mean? Like, because some man on social media that's not even in my own country said so, and now they're a terrible person. Like, you know what I mean? It's so, I get so frustrated with it.
I see it from both like sides of like influential people, influencers that are male and female. Because I've even watched a lot of female ones that I go, that's like somewhat toxic in terms of the way of what you're saying and the expectations that you again, it's a blanket statement that has no, they have no information about the relationship, the situation, but it's like, if this situation happens, you leave them. You're worth more than that. And I kind of go, what is this showing people? Like, it's very, I don't know. I've found it just really interesting to navigate myself, and now being more conscious of myself, being like, just because they're saying it doesn't mean I have to take it on board.
And I'm going to even give another perspective here. Sorry, guys, I'm going to just side note here. From a content creator's perspective, there's been times when I've put up content speaking to a particular situation, and maybe it's from a podcast, or maybe it's like from a talk, or whatever that might be, and people take that reel and apply it to every situation. And, and it's like, no, that was 60 seconds of my life. Like, you need to actually listen to the context and the background. So it's so hard, because it's like, just use your discernment, guys.
Yeah, but I think that's what people lack, because there's so much information there, and not trusting their own judgment and knowing themselves. It's like our last podcast, right? I put up a bunch of reels on TikTok. You're like, you could walk into the gym tomorrow, meet the love of your life, and the comments are like, no thanks. Tried that, been at the same gym for 20 years, haven't met anyone.
I go to a female-only gym.
Yeah.
I didn't mean the gym. I meant it's a figure of speech.
The whole premise was you could walk into the gym. Then there's comments like, I don't go to the gym, so there's no luck for me.
Yeah.
The fun of social media.
Yeah. Look, it's a lot. And, I understand... I understand so much where it all comes from. I think if I was to counterbalance any of that constant relationship advice that's out there, it's stop listening to reels. Go and find content creators that provide educational tools or education about what's happening, not opinions, and then try and, as much as you can, come back to yourself. Rather than spending time listening to them on social media, spend time getting to know yourself. Journal, write down, what have I loved in my relationships? What didn't work for me? What were my favorite aspects? What brought out the best in me? What do I need to work on? Where did I self-sabotage? The more you know that, the more you're going to know what kind of dynamics are actually going to work for you.
I think that even in that, even like the education side, all the opinions that we watch or whatever it may be, actually go back to your relationship and have those conversations, not just be outside and be like, they said this, so then I'm going to just project all that onto this person and, pour this other person, whichever side it is, they're just like, what? You've never said this before in my life. And if someone's like, the question I've got down is like, what is the difference between a conscious and an unconscious relationship?
Very simply put, a conscious relationship, there's a level of awareness. We're trying to be aware of, where is my behavior coming from? How am I impacting this relationship? What am I doing? What don't I need to be doing? Where can I learn? Where can I grow? And basically, you both want both parties, not just one, to do that. So it becomes like this pot plant. You're both kind of watering the pot plant, nurturing the pot plant. You're both seeing when you're pissing in the pot and trying to be creating this dynamic where you want this pot plant to grow. So it's not just actually about like, how do I feel? It's, okay, what's our long-term goals for our relationship? Do we want to buy a house? Do we want to move to France? What do we want to do? And really nurturing it in that way. When it comes to an unconscious relationship, we're kind of just letting all the dynamics play out. We're kind of leaning into that little devil on the shoulder that's saying like, hey, like, yell at him. You know what I mean? Or like, make them jealous. So, and we're constantly picking that choice and not actually taking the time to self-reflect and see how we might be damaging things.
So the when that then comes to the awareness side of, because we were saying this before, and we've both, from what we were talking about before, we've both experienced it where we've been in something and maybe sometimes it started off as unconscious and then you've gained some awareness and learnt some things, which is as we're doing as humans, and then we start to implement things, and there sometimes is that little bit of growing pain of like, you become conscious of something or become aware or learn something and then you want to implement it. That's then going to change the dynamic of the relationship. How do you support people or in doing that in that relationship? Because people then come, like, I'm guessing most people come to a relationship counsellor when things aren't going well.
Correct.
Yeah. So how do you then navigate from unconscious to conscious if there's resistance?
This is where it gets a little bit tricky because it's a very common pattern that I see. People come in where they might have gained a little bit of awareness and they've learned about their attachment styles, they've learned about their love languages, how they fight, where all their trauma has come from, and they're ready to go and process that. And what tends to happen is because they have learnt something, they then go, you're an avoidant. You're an anxious, you're this, you're that. And this person who's not quite there already and was just happily plodding along in life is now suddenly bombarded with all this information. And that instantly makes that person go, what? Like, this is, now I'm not good enough, now I'm all these things. And the other person thinks that they're helping because they can see the benefits from them learning it. If you're in that dynamic and you're wanting to start to shift things, you've always got to pull from on top of the rock, which means not actually interfering with the other person's journey, allow them to have it, but, oh my God, I learned this. This is going to help me with this. And then when that person does things that may be impacting you, it doesn't mean just letting it go because now you have the skills to process it, but actually saying, Carlo, when you ignore me for 2 days after an argument, that is really hurting my feelings. And that's not the kind of dynamic I want to have in this relationship. And you're setting that boundary and you're saying to that person what will and won't be tolerated. We don't change because someone told us to change. You've got to kind of self-analyze. When do I change? I change when I've ran myself into the ground enough times that it hurts, or when I'm motivated to change. Not when someone hands me, 20 PDFs and tells me to read them in my relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like when that does happen, you can almost feel attacked because you're like, where did this come from?
Yes.
I thought everything was fine until now. And maybe things were swept under the rug, but it was like, things have been okay.
But it's not in their awareness. You know what I mean? So it's like for them, we were talking about this before actually, when something's outside of your awareness and someone says something, you're just like, oh yeah, like it doesn't hit you. Like they don't understand. They're going to understand when they know, oh, I can't keep doing that or whatever it is. again, it's such a dance. And it's a dance that you kind of learn through doing, because it's like you've also got to give them grace, but you've also then got to have your own boundaries, but you've also got to be understanding. It's not an easy thing going from like an unconscious relationship to a conscious relationship and remain together. It's very difficult. It's very challenging. And so many times I see kind of one person outgrow the other. But we were talking about it before. Matthew McConaughey put up an amazing reel where he spoke about sometimes you're just in different chapters, but you're in the same journey. And you've just kind of got to let things have teething problems and play out, and not instantly be like, oh, well, now that I know this, I'm so much better. Because there's going to be times where that person overtakes you, you know?
Just interrupting for a little announcement. I have not got an ad for you of a product, but I do have an ad per se of me and all the things that I am launching in the new year. I have so many exciting things coming to you. I have my mentorship. I have my Conscious Blueprint program. I have events that are coming up all around Australia, but also online that you can join in and plug into. My big intention for 2025 is to help people thrive, to empower them, to elevate their mindset, their beliefs, to create and live a life that you want to. And now is the time to do that. And I've created basically the mentorship and the community that I've always wanted to create. If you want to be a part of a community that keeps you accountable, that is supportive, and that you learn and grow along this journey of life, because things happen from time to time, and having a space where you can navigate all of that with support, with growth, with education is super important, what I've found in my life anyway. So if you're wanting to know yourself on a deeper level, if you're wanting to love yourself on a deeper level, if you're wanting to be yourself authentically in 2025, head to carlocirillo.com. You'll see all the things that I've got coming up. You'll see the mentorship, you'll see the program, you'll see my events, and you'll see the free masterclass on how to create your empowering vision for 2025. I'm so excited, one, for 2024 to end because it's been a shit show, but two, for 2025 to start, because I just feel with the intention that I'm bringing and the energy that's coming, we can create the best year of our lives. And I want to do it alongside you. So if you're interested, go check it out. The links are in the show notes below, and enjoy the rest of this episode. If people are in a relationship and one person has now gained this awareness, maybe they attended one of my seminars or they watched some of your content, wherever they've found it, right? They've had a breathwork session and they've had these revelations about their life. They've started a growth journey, gained some awareness, and they feel like they're making, these inroads in their life, and they're starting to become more conscious, more aware, and grow at a certain rate, but they find the other person isn't, or maybe isn't at that stage, or isn't as receptive to those things. How does one navigate that from both sides?
So like I said, we're kind of doing it in a way where it's sharing the information, but without putting it on top of someone. So I can say what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. But if that person's isn't receptive to it, and they're like, that's a you thing, you've kind of got to honor that. And if it gets to a point where you're like, I don't think that this is now in a place, then unfortunately you've got a difficult decision to make. I wish, it's such a commonly asked question. I wish I could give you some magic fairy dust that gets them on the journey with you. But the way that you learn, it's similar to what we were saying about the relationship reels. The way that you learn and the way that you got there isn't going to be the same for them. And it's quite arrogant of us to assume that we can control someone else's journey, unfortunately. When we're on the other side of that, and it's like we're not very receptive to it, you've also then got to have your own boundaries in a way. If it's something that's not for you, it's not for you. Yeah.
And I think that's I've seen this happen in my program, for example. So I used to run, it's evolving now, a program called the Conscious Blueprint, and majority female come into it. And if they're in a relationship, they come in and they, start to learn about themselves. They go through forgiveness and gratitude and know their values and purpose and create a vision for their life. There's been times where I got messages from their partners being like, you've changed them. What have you done? are you sleeping with my partner? And it's like, whoa.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
Yeah, but like, whoa, mate, I've done nothing. Or in that process, I've never told anyone what to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've realized who they are and what they want in life, and it doesn't necessarily, go with what they've been living or who they've been with, and they've decided to step away from that relationship. Mm-hmm. And that's where I normally get the nasty messages or the phone calls, and it's just been like, I don't tell people what to do, but obviously they've had a revelation. And sorry, mate, you don't fit along with it. And I'm happy for them, not for them, but you, like you said, you can't force someone's journey. And I think we're all going to have moments in our life where we learn something or we start to have that. I don't think it ever happens at the same time. Mm. Like, you could both go to the same Tony Robbins event. One could sit there and be like, all right, I'm bored.
Yeah.
Or the other one goes, whoa, everything landed. It's that whole, like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and that resonates. Yeah. It's a tough one.
It's interesting because I would say 75% of the people that come to me and they say, my partner won't do the work, and that's generally why they're booked in, and this is what I'm wanting out of the dynamic, and they're not there. And I bring that awareness and that focus back to them, and let's go through your stuff and let's focus on you. It almost gives them the confidence to step away from something, because, and that's not saying that I guide or that I tell them to do, but they might realize at a certain point, it's usually, I'll say to them, well, you've also now got to have boundaries of that behavior, like I said before. And they go, oh, but I'm scared to do that because they might leave me. And my question always is, why would you want to be in a dynamic that someone might leave you for not tolerating disrespect or abuse? And I know that's not the answer that everyone wants to hear, but why would, I'm not someone who's out here to save all relationships. I don't love all relationships. Some relationships are very unhealthy and they actually need to end for the best of both people. That might get me cancelled. Everyone wants me to be a magical fairy, and sometimes I'm not.
Well, that goes back to, can every situation and every relationship be fixed and healed and work?
No. Not every relationship can. You just at different times with different things. And sometimes when we have two people that have very similar core wounds, you're narcissistic and you're empath, and that's a very difficult situation to put two people in and go figure it out.
I think that's what, when you're in a relationship and, you're not seeing a counsellor or whoever for support, it is tough because you're just like, what do I do? Or you try things because you read a book or, watch a reel and you're like, I'm trying these things. What have you seen or learnt the benefits of having that third party come in to support?
The way that I work is I don't see couples. I actually work with an individual.
But do you work with both individuals?
I can do, yes.
Oh, but so they don't come to you as a couple, like...
And that, for me, is because of the style that I work with. So for me, it's very much about processing somatically what's going on with you and what's going on with that person. But when I first started and I had a couple of couples come in, one person didn't want to be there.
Yep.
That was the general trait. So I want to work with the person who is there and help them process their stuff. Yep. And then if they want to take that, and you know what I mean? But yeah, it's interesting. Maybe that's just my experience where I didn't necessarily have a lot of couples coming in together wanting to work on things. But I'm also, given my age, working with people who are generally 30 to 40. Yeah. Yeah.
So this whole dynamic of one's ahead, that whole Matthew McConaughey reel, one's ahead, maybe they've had these breakthroughs, they're feeling super aligned, they've got their values, they're, maybe doing really well in their career and financially, whatever it may be, and then you've got the other one that might be going through a rock bottom moment. I know that's a hard dynamic to navigate because the one that's ahead will be like, well, why aren't you at this point? And the one that's at this point might be like, well, I'm feeling not adequate because I'm going through this and I feel like I should be there, and that may cause some conflict. How do you navigate that?
It's a challenging thing to do, but that's where you've really got to just pull back the bullshit. So if I am feeling like my partner is getting ahead of me and I'm not on that page, and it's bringing up all these feelings of insecurity and feeling inadequate, strip it off and go heart to heart and go, I feel like I'm lacking right now, and this is why, and I'm not sure what to do, or whatever it might be. And the person that's ahead, like, I don't want to say ahead, but has come to this new level of awareness, have the conversations of, I feel like I'm on this trajectory. I want you to come with me. I do. Is this something that you would be open to? Is this something you want to go down? And then you can kind of make an informed decision for the long-term health. But it's such a tricky dynamic because it's just, you can't force someone. And then also you can't make a decision off the cuff because there's kids, there's, houses, there's all these other situations that are involved in that as well.
And I've seen these dynamics play out in some of my clients and people that I've worked with, in terms of stereotypical, the female has, found themselves and they're working towards this thing, and they're doing things that are very different to being a stay-at-home mum of what they have been before, and they're now stepping into, coaching or whatever it may be, their business and all of that. And you've got the kind of stereotypical husband that's just worked the same job, and they're like, I don't get any of this stuff. I don't even have social media type thing, where that created a bit of resistance because it was like, you've never done this. I've never known this person. The person that was, growing and whatever new levels of consciousness is going, you need to be up here. And the other one going, that's not what I signed up for. This is not what we got into the relationship with. And as we know, like, our values are going to grow and evolve, and, when are we ever going to be on the same path? Like, we could be the same age, born in the same place, but, Saturn return, or whatever. Things are going to happen at different points. Everyone's going to gain level of awareness at a different time. And yeah, I see there's the perspective of, like, if you find someone that's at this same point, like, unreal, but also things are going to happen that are going to then put us out of, that stable kind of point. And I guess it's just, what can people do to, one, communicate better, but two, not make these harsh decisions out of emotion, but more so communicate so that, they can come together. I think most relationships want to come together more. How do they start coming together and communicating better, especially if they're at a point where things are so different than what they used to be in the relationship?
I'll start with the first question.
Was there like 6 in there?
Yeah. So the first one was, how do they communicate better?
Yeah.
This is where the tools of your individual journey come in. Not every thought that you have is real or rational. So you might be in the moment and you might see a couple and on Instagram, and they're very conscious, and they're going to these meditation retreats and they're doing all these things, and you might turn around and go, well, you can't. You've got to see, like, okay, like, what is that activating in me? What is it that I'm wanting out of that? And also, is that what I really want? Because I think there's also a level where people mold and shift dynamics and relationships, and it all changes, and then they go, you're not who you used to be. So you've really got to learn to kind of sit back with that. And then whenever you're communicating, it's always from your own perspective. It's never about, you should be doing this, I need you to do that. Hey, I would like to go ahead and do this. Is this something you would be open to attending with me? We can't blame the other person for being where they are on their journey, because they're exactly where they need to be for a reason. And they'll get there when it suits them. You know what I mean? Unfortunately. And then I've forgotten the second question.
How can people better communicate what they want and need?
Isn't that what I just answered? Where they got to take
But I
time?
guess it's like, what okay, so from my perspective is like when I've seen this play out, sometimes it can be like, as you just said, like could be at the dinner table having dinner and just like out of nowhere, I'm feeling this because of what you did. I'm doing this. It's like, is there a right time and place, a way that's more of a soft, gentle approach? Because I know there's emotion that gets in it, and you know, thank you social media for like stand up for yourself and say this and speak your truth. And it's like, yeah, but don't be a cunt about it.
This is where it's challenging, because I like to say you want a dynamic where you can try and communicate most things, but not at any time. Does that make sense? So I want to say most things, not everything, because not every thought is real. Not every thought I believe. My emotions just made me feel that way for a split second. It's not truth to me or you. And then not at any time. So is Carlo about to go and host a podcast? Yes. Not right now. Does he have a work meeting tomorrow? Yes, it's a pretty big one. I probably should leave this. Constructing these conversations in a way where, you know, emotions are low and there's space. And you've got to approach it in a way where it's like, I want to have a bit of a difficult conversation with you, but I love you and I care about you and I want us to do our best right now to see eye to eye. And all of these things, you know, there's a million different ways where I can say to people, say it like this and say it like that. And it comes down to that simple thing of what we were saying before, where you have to know yourself to speak from your own heart and know your own dynamic to speak from a way that you know is going to be best received by them. I wish I could give a perfect little template that would suit everyone and there wouldn't be an argument, but it doesn't exist. And there's going to be discomfort around that conversation. Let it. Good communication isn't about both of us sitting there perfectly regulated and figuring it all out. It's being able to sit in the discomfort and still be kind and loving and seeing and hearing the other person. Your nervous systems are still going to spike. How can we recover from that in a way that's great?
What I've noticed in my own experience is at the times where it might be so heightened and I'm like, I really need to say this because it's urgent. They just did that thing, or, you know, I'm feeling really, emotional because this has been happening and I'm getting to the, you know, my point of explosion type thing. For me, leaving it a few days, even the text message, writing it in my notes, and then just leaving it there. Because sometimes, well, our body, our human nature is to just react to a lot of things. And I've fallen into that in relationships where it was just react. Just, you know, if they've sent a text message, then I've got to send the text message right now. Whereas it's like, I can think about that. And then when I write it in my, this is not advice, this is just what I do, but I put it in my notes. I look at it later after I've, you know, done whatever I've needed to do. Because sometimes you do have other things to do. Maybe you're at work. Maybe you've got, you need to show up in those moments. Deal with that later. I don't think everything needs to be solved in that moment straight away because, like, you know, we have time. Every time I've done that, I've allowed myself to think at it from all perspectives. And I've also gone back and gone, if I said it in that way, that's coming across as such an asshole. I can write this better. Actually, even better, I can have it in person. But these are good notes to have. And if I had sent that message that could have been miscommunicated, misread, misinterpreted, and that could have led to something even worse.
So there's a reason.
I'm learning from my mistakes.
Yeah, Carlo. So there's a reason as well. Like, actually, first of all, if you're going to do something similar, and again, this isn't advice, and you want to take some time and cool off, blah, 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 please just send that person a text message and say, I hear you. I've read this. I acknowledge this. Yeah. I'm just going to take a minute to process this so I can come back and represent myself in the best way possible.
Love that.
Please do that, because then it's just serving to everyone, and it just stops them being like, and you didn't care. It just...
Yeah, you went blank for a week.
Yes.
And they were like, yeah, but I was thinking about it.
Yeah. And then you're like, well, you're an avoidant. And it becomes a whole dance. I've done it many times, guys. Anyway.
Triggered. Pew, pew.
And also, when we're in that fight or flight state and we're at our absolute peak window of tolerance, Your brain, your body does not care. It actually just wants the threat to go away. So you're not going to represent yourself or your relationship in the best possible way, because you're going to go, all right, fuck you, get away from me, leave then. And then you're going to go, I didn't mean that. That's not actually what I wanted. I just actually wanted the situation to stop or to have a break from it. So you've really got to have some awareness in that as well, because we can say and do a lot of things that we don't actually mean, and there's a biological reason for it.
So what would you say to couples that are finding themselves at each other, things are happening, one wants to improve, but both want to improve? What's something you would want to remind them of in those situations where they may be misunderstanding and not on the same page?
I'm going to teach you something right now, and this is very quite profound, I think, in helping people with arguments and relationships. It's polyvagal theory. So when we have...
Say that again.
Polyvagal theory. Have you heard of it before?
Nope.
Okay. So let's say that you and I are sitting here. You're constantly scanning me through your nervous system to see emotional cues from me. Am I happy? Am I smiling? Do I look angry? And then if I went dead cold and I'm looking off to the side and my body posture changes, you're going to notice it. And the first thing you might try and do is go, are you okay? And you're going to try through that social engagement, are you all right? Something change, and make that connection. If it is a repetitive behavior maybe, or let's say you're already particularly really stressed and you're having a bad day, you're more near your window of tolerance, and I do this, you go, you always do this. So you've already gone straight into your sympathetic state and you're already there. So that's why you can kind of joke and say something with someone one day, and then the next day it's like, oh, okay, like that didn't land. When you're both in that sympathetic state, you need to come back down to your regulated parasympathetic state. And you can do that through co-regulation, or you can do that through a bit of separation, self-regulating, and then co-regulate. It's really important that at some point there is some co-regulation and that you're bonding together so that you feel like it's actually resolved. Now, having that like awareness of where that person is at is really good, because we don't actually decide which one we go into. For people who have experienced a lot of trauma, they might actually go all the way into dorsal. So if you're having a conversation with someone and let's say I start to yell at you and you just go blank and you shut down, that's not necessarily avoidance. Their nervous system is like, just disengage, play dead, don't say anything, don't make any sudden movements. So learning how to be like, okay, like we are both right now in our sympathetic state and we're both really here. I also need to understand that when I'm in that sympathetic state, I'm going to miss cues for connection. And a lot of couples do this. They'll be at each other, they'll be arguing, they'll be fighting, and they don't even realize that one person will go, okay, like, do you want a hug? And you go, get away from me. You know what I mean? Because your brain is just, you're in fight or flight. You're literally just, I don't care about any of those soft eyes. I don't care about those kind words. I'm just looking for what I want to see. Having that awareness just really helps, I think. It kind of lets you figure out, when am I fighting a battle against our nervous systems that no one's going to win?
Because then that just keeps going. Then it's tennis.
Yeah.
You back and forth. And
usually then there's an explosion, and then you both kind of separate and regulate, and a lot of couples then dysregulate and come back together and leave it. And that's when over time they train the nervous system that person's a threat. Because they're not coming back, they're not co-regulating. Once they've co-regulated, you need to co-regulate and you need to talk about it. And whether that means, like I said before, there's not going to be a resolved, okay, well, how can we prevent that from happening next time? So there's some sort of forward action.
And what if let's say you're in that relationship, and let's say you've had this scenario play out, and one person is coming in and like, hey, I want to talk about this, but the other one still is in that, gets triggered by that fight or flight. Like, not necessarily they do want to come back in, but it keeps being avoided and it keeps happening.
Mm-hmm. This is where it's difficult, but that's where you need to say, okay, I can see that this is still really triggering for you right now, I'm going to give you some space and I'm going to let you kind of self-regulate. I'm going to let you resolve this. And then when you're ready, come back and let's have a chat about it. That way it's not maybe me approaching it or the way I'm approaching it, because you don't know exactly what's kind of setting them off. They're coming and going, okay, like, what do I want out of this? Like, how am I going to, it's now my responsibility to help this move forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Taking self-responsibility, being self-aware, I think it's like the current theme in all these things we've been talking about. It's like you two individuals coming together and people are going to be changing and evolving. If you don't communicate that and share that, because like at the end of the day, there's multiple things that can come from those multiple resolutions from those conversations, but it's either going to be, okay, we're in this together, let's work on this together as individuals, but also together, or this isn't sitting anymore. It's, time to part.
Yeah. And it's difficult because it's like that nuance of like, I can provide you guys with the information, but you guys really will know that like on your own accord. I think the biggest thing that I really give with any of my stuff, or that I want people to take away from it, is the things like not just the meditation, but just really doing the shadow work, doing everything you can, like, and continuing your journey, because a lot of people go on the individual journey, get in a relationship and go, don't need that anymore, found my person. Continuing to do that because you need to know and be in touch with yourself and your own intuition and all of that stuff, so that you can actually analyze things from a lens, because emotional relationships are very emotional. They're not very logical when we're in it. So we need to be able to go, okay, let me go back to my logic a little bit here and make a rational decision.
Yeah. What do you think are the key things that are important? What do you think? What do you think are some key important points that relationships should focus on, whether they're at the start, in the middle, and navigating stuff?
If you're at the start, one thing that I think that not a lot of people know, but it would be very helpful for society to kind of know, is that we all have relationship deficiencies. And essentially what that is that we all have things that we kind of struggle with. Some people, it's not necessarily that they lack empathy, but they struggle to see things from other people's perspective if they haven't, lived through it. Some people have, like mine is like, when I'm not in contact with people, I not that I miss them, I almost like forget. And it's not that I don't care about them, but it's like that object permanency, it's like, oh, okay, yes, that thing. And we all kind of have it. For some people, they struggle to read facial cues. There's like 12 different ones. Learning to understand yours and your partner's can be hugely beneficial, because they're not just an asshole. There's just an area of their relationship that they might need to work on. Another similar one with that is that when we go back to our nervous system kind of stuff, is that people can be more sympathetic or parasympathetic dominant. That has nothing to do with attachment styles. That's just where they operate during the day. The people that are more sympathetic are more high energy. They might get more anxiety easier. People who are parasympathetic are, you're, whatever, man. Oh, I don't care. And they're more likely to fall into like the depression and that kind of state. Understanding where your partner is actually going to really help your dynamic more than you think, because for the person, I know if I'm constantly up here and I'm bubbly and I'm so happy to go to event after event after event, and I'm trying to drag someone along that with me, and they might be more parasympathetic, it's going to be way too much for them. And I might pass off them being blasé as not caring. So there's some good little things at the start that you can kind of start to learn more about, rather than just, I think everyone's kind of gone on the bandwagon of just anxious and avoidant, but there's more. There's so much more to learn. If you're in the middle of your relationship, that's generally, it's interesting, because I would say the middle, which is quite a pivotal point, is after the honeymoon period. And after the honeymoon period, we're really presented with this choice. And it's either we are going to fight to constantly try and get back the honeymoon period, or we're going to accept that we are now growing into a mature, healthy love, and that there's going to be times where it doesn't feel amazing, and that we're going to realize that we're both human, and we're both going to fuck up, and we're both going to project, and we're both going to yell, and all these things are going to happen, unless you're Gundy, which I don't think any of you are. So like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, there's going to be, we're humans, we're human beings. So you have to be able to have awareness of that transition and be willing to just kind of go with that and know that, yes, it might not feel as satisfactory as what the honeymoon period felt, but there's such a deeper, meaningful connection that can be built in that. And also, your honeymoon period is predominantly just different hormones because we're animals and they're designed to make us mate. So you're fighting biology. So it's natural that it kind of goes away at some point.
How do you revisit or rekindle that honeymoon phase?
It's difficult because it's always going to be a little bit different, because you're not going to have the huge rushes of dopamine and oxytocin. But one thing that I love to share is that if you kiss for 6 seconds or you hug for 20 seconds, it releases oxytocin. So if you keep things fun and passionate and playful, that's all going to really kind of help with that. And I think that that's like a huge epidemic that I constantly see, is now that people have gone through their own healing journey, they come into this relationship and they're so serious. And I think it's also an age thing as well, where it's like, well, I might have a baby with this person, so we've got to, and they forget to play and have fun. One of my most successful relationships was so successful because I would be so angry and he would make me laugh. And we were able to kind of like resolve it from that. But it was like, and we'd go back to it, but it just was that circuit breaker in the tension. That's super important.
What would you say to someone listening right now and they're sitting here and they're like, I've been here for months, if not years. I've tried having these conversations. It's not getting through. There's no meeting in the middle. There's no effort on that behalf. What would you say to that person in that situation?
As a holistic relationship counselor, I can't tell you what to do. But if you're at this point where you've done everything you can, I just want you to reflect on, do you feel like you're abandoning yourself at this point? Because if so, there's probably a point where you need to choose yourself. I didn't tell you what to do though.
I think this whole conversation and why I love speaking to you and people on the podcast is you're not telling people what to do. You're asking questions. You're bringing awareness. Now, if you're listening, take those questions and that awareness to the relationship and have a conversation about those things. I think that's where it's...
Don't say Simi said I have to choose myself. Okay, don't throw me under the bus. I don't want any angry DMs.
Don't say Carlo. I listen to Carlo's podcast and they go to my profile and they're like, fuck you, man.
Are you sleeping with my girl?
We laugh. It's happened way more times than... it's fine because... Again, when someone then looks at my content, I'm always saying, I'm never going to tell someone what to do.
I think
it's a threat.
What will be powerful is maybe if I share this from my own journey, is that there have definitely been times in relationships on my journey, and particularly as I was becoming more aware and going into the space of being a holistic relationship counselor, etc., where I was kind of the one who was always dragging the person. And when I look back, the pivotal moments where I ended up choosing myself and like I didn't have the self-confidence necessarily to walk away from the relationship. There was still a lot of work that needed to be done within me because I didn't want to be alone. Every single time I look back, I am so proud of that Simi for picking herself. Just so proud of her because it just grew her into a place where I won't entertain things that don't serve me. And not that everyone needs to serve me, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I think if you're someone that's like at that cusp of like, do I stay? Do I go? Are you staying because you don't want to be alone? That's probably a good question to reflect on, because if the answer is yes, that's something to really consider.
It's going to make a great reel.
They always yell at me when I don't say like love is love and we're all going to love each other.
Yeah, but I think that the fantasy is that everything just works out, and you know the Cinderella. You drop your shoe, you find that person, and we never hear the after story of Cinderella and all these other people. Did they not have any fights or arguments? Did they operate from a regulated nervous system?
This is what I always say to people. If you want to believe that, there's this one person and you meet and you figure that all out and it's just perfect, great. Believe that. Do that. But in the meantime, if you want to double your chances, just start to do some of the work and reflecting on yourself. And then if that works out for you, great. And if it doesn't, we've got a backup plan. It's not going to happen.
And this is this journey of like that we're on and we're teachers of is we share content to help people become more aware. If you're more aware of yourself, then you'll know. And again, I don't think there's levels to it, but there's definitely a maturity to it where you start to then go, this is me and my needs and wants and attachment styles and all this sort of stuff. And then you're another human being with your own experiences and needs. If I want to be in a relationship with you, I have to honor that, understand that, and not come into it with, here's all your negatives, or we don't exactly align the exact same person. I think that would also annoy me if we were exactly the same. But it's like, I don't know. This is how I look at it is, one, do you really like this person? Because if there's there's going to be things you don't necessarily like, but if you hate certain things, it's probably not going to end well in the long term. But like, you come together on those similar values. And I know that if you are, and I've been in this situation, if you're not communicating and have communication as a relationship, where are we going? Then there's going to be one person always like, what is this? Why am I here? Like, do we have a similar vision for this? If not, then, you could have one person that's like, I really want to have a family and settle down. And then one person that goes, no, I don't want to. I want to travel. And it's like, okay, they could work, but what trajectory is your life at? And I guess that's the dating side of things. That's the last podcast. But, that evolvement can happen in a relationship. But asking these questions, becoming aware, and then having the conversations, I think we can over communicate more at the right times.
It's so nuancy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's so.
Because social media shows that if you're in if the relationship is great, you should be going to Pain and Sip every weekend. You should be, posting all these things. I look at social media and go, if someone's posting too much about their relationship, it's not going to last. And I know that's a very blanket statement to make, but I've been right nearly every single time, because it's like, we don't need to see it. One, you can share photos. I'm not saying that, but if it's overhyped, what are you trying to make up for here? And I think that in my life, just in my own personal life, the less I've shared to everyone else and in my relationships and dynamics, that I've just had those communications and worked out whatever the next step is, the more that I've been patient in these situations and reflected on myself as well as, what's happening, but also looked at myself and looked at, what's coming up for me and all of that, the more these dynamics and these situations have not so much worked out, but have been less chaotic.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they've been perfect. I'm not saying I've reached resolution straight away or they've aligned perfectly, but it's been less chaotic for my life. Whereas when it was fire and it's like this, that, and there's probably going to be moments of that in your life, that didn't work well for me, and it affected every area of my life. Whereas now it's like, just again, ask those questions, become more aware myself, but, communicate. But also from a loving place. I think that's what changed for me maybe the past 2 years. Or even just, honestly, recently, is even when I'm communicating with someone that I'm not in a relationship with, can I come from a loving place?
Yeah. And that's where that space that we spoke about is so important, because there is a fight, in internal battle. Like, I'm speaking about this stuff and I'm giving you guys the education, and then you guys are going to get in the moment and you're going to go, fuck what she said. You know what I mean? But you have to have like an internal battle to really witness your protective coping strategies and yourself disarm them to get to a place where you can speak from your own heart. And when you do, and you kind of go, what's behind the mask, and you come, if most genuine loving people, when you come at it from a place of like, Carlo, I want this to work, and I'm really sorry about that, and you're at this soft space, they will meet you there, but you've got to get there first. Both of you.
Just remembering that everyone is so different, and different stages of life, different involvements, and different maturity, and the expectation that we have on others can also let us down in a lot of ways.
And I think that that's a really paramount thing that I am seeing a lot of at the moment. And it's, you've got to let people be their own person. You've got to let them, you can't shape this person into who you want them to be. That person is who they are. You can tell them when they're doing things that are going to hurt you and affect you. Of course, you're not going to just tolerate being shat on, but you've got to let them be their own experience. And when you want kindness and compassion because you got triggered and you yelled, or you did something that said something you didn't mean, you've also got to extend that back. Because I think a lot of the times people can have this expectation of this person being perfect, but then wanting the other person to appreciate their imperfectness. You know what I mean? Like, if what you want, you've got to give. As simple and as cliche as that sounds, it's really, really actually sit in that for a second and think about that.
And things may not improve overnight, but it can over time.
And it's a journey. It's all a journey. Every relationship, each relationship you have is a journey. And then in that relationship is a journey of a journey. You know what I mean? And trying to navigate two people's journey at the same time, it's like climbing Mount Everest. You want to climb together, and occasionally this person goes off to that base camp and then comes back and goes, look what I saw. You know what I mean? You've got to allow. It's like the constant dance between independence and interdependence.
And then codependence. Well, no.
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 Co-regulation is what he meant. We want co-regulation, not codependence.
Oh, I love it. Where can people learn more about themselves and relationships?
If you want to learn more about relationships, I do suggest going and reading books. More so than watching reels or watching YouTube videos, because people will intentionally say things that might be controversial because it's what gets views.
And it's their opinion.
It's their opinion. So if you're wanting to learn more, go and read a book. Go and really actually listen to something educational, read something educational, learn to understand what's happening. And then also, on top of that, and I know I've said it a million times, please keep coming back to you. Keep doing your own personal journey within all of that, because then you're going to have the discernment to know, okay, this issue is me, this issue is them, this issue is us, and you'll be able to navigate that in a lot more fluid way. The signs of a healthy nervous system is flexibility. So the more you do that and you're flexible, even when it's challenging, the more beneficial it is to both of you.
Love that. Another amazing chat, Simi. Thank you.
I don't want to go. I like it here.
See you again in 4 weeks. No, but I love this. And I think that because relationships are such a big part of our human experience, this is something that I want to do regularly. And I want, if you're listening or watching, make sure you're following us because and ask questions. Like, come in and ask, because the more questions that I get, I can be like, Simi, come join me. And let's have a discussion about it.
And honestly, like, I love doing this kind of stuff. Like, for those of you who might be from JAR, you might have noticed I've taken a bit of hiatus, and that's obviously a reflection of the whole projection thing that I've noticed going on. So being able to come into this space where you can actually hear me talk and I can break down the nuances with Carlo, who's an amazing host, is just absolutely amazing.
Call me a hostess.
Hostess with mostess. No, so it's so much more fun, and I think that you kind of actually get more bang for your buck rather than a 60-second reel that might not be tailored to you.
Yeah, and I think those that have listened before and know me and resonate with my work is that I will not bring someone on that says you need to do this, you must do this, and it's that polarizing, like, do this, one size fits all. And that's why I appreciate the work that you do and resonate with it, and I love having conversations with you, because it's like, one, you come from an educational background, and I want people to learn from that, not watch a reel from someone in America that's just had a opinion that
they
goes
finally
viral.
got in a healthy relationship and suddenly they're a relationship coach.
Yes. Yeah, that is lots of different industries where that's happening, but the just because, and this is it goes to a lot of different conversations, but just because someone's got that reel went viral does not mean that that's great advice or education on something. And I think it always goes back to that discernment. It's been a common theme on the podcast recently, but take what has been discussed on this episode and sit with it. I think the biggest thing here is start to raise your consciousness or open your consciousness to, okay, I can ask myself some questions to get more clarity on situations for myself, but also in this relationship. And, I wish you all the best with whatever situation you're in. And if you need more support in that, don't come to me. That's where you go to someone like Simi. All I'll do is be like, start at those foundations for yourself. But I know it can be tough navigating relationships because dynamics are so unique. And I think that's one thing I want people to remember, is that every relationship is so unique because you're unique. The dynamic's unique. The scenarios are unique. You may have a child, you may not. Something may come up, a new career, a new someone might grow at a certain rate, and all of that. So it's just, don't compare and discern what information you listen to, because your situation is unique.
And also, most importantly, your trauma and your wounds are unique. What's going to mean a lot to you might not mean a lot to other people.
Yeah. Wow. Where can people connect with you, Simi? Where are you most active? In my life, living my life, yeah.
In one of my millions of channels I've got going at the moment. It's a lot, guys. So there's Simi.Gosling, and that is where you can find me as just a bit of a social media fun practitioner thing if you are into that kind of thing. However, if you want to reach me on a relationship level, jar.academy.
Awesome. Beautiful. Well, until next time, Simi, thank you. Take care, everyone. Peace.
Bye.